The shot rang out sharply in the dust-laden air of the mining outpost, echoing off the steel walls like a thrown wrench in a cargo bay. Ethan Lorne hit the ground hard, clutching his side as a jolt of pain stole his breath. He stared at his gloved hands, now slick with blood. "Damn it," Ethan muttered, teeth clenched as he rolled to his back behind the overturned loader. The wound burned like fire under pressure. His comm crackled. "Status, Lorne," came the voice of Captain Viral, the Velari expedition lead. Ethan tapped the comm bead in his ear. "Took a bullet. Right side, clean through, I think, still breathing." There was a pause, then a slightly panicked reply. "You've been shot." "Yeah. We're dispatching medical immediately, do not move." Ethan managed a bitter laugh as he pressed harder against the wound. Not really in the mood for dancing anyway. The skirmish had come out of nowhere. A rogue band of scavengers had breached the perimeter fence while the team was surveying mineral deposits on Phaelon 6. They weren't expecting resistance, and certainly not from a human who refused to stay down. Minutes later, a sleek medical crawler skidded to a halt near the loader. The side hatch hissed open and a tall, pale blue alien stepped out. Her name tag read, Medical Technician Kirel. She moved fast, scanning the area with a small orb that hovered beside her. "Human Ethan, remain calm," Kirel said, kneeling beside him. "You are bleeding rapidly, we must stabilize." "I figured that much," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "Bullets still in there, I think." Kirel's four-fingered hand moved to his side. She hesitated. "This projectile, it's inside your body." Her voice was hard to read, somewhere between alarmed and confused. "Yeah," Ethan nodded. "Probably lodged in the muscle, just pull it out and patch me up." Kirel froze. "That is not advisable. Removal without complete scan risks further trauma. You may suffer internal hemorrhaging." Ethan leaned his head back against the loader. "It hurts like hell, but this isn't my first rodeo." She blinked rapidly, then activated a scanning wand from her belt. "You have experienced this type of injury before." "Not exactly like this, but close enough. Iraq, 23 years ago, got hit in the thigh. Doc pulled it out, patched it, gave me a few weeks on crutches." Kirel's expression darkened. "This is not Earth. We do not guess at injuries." The medbot rolled closer and extended a surgical table. Kirel and her assistant, a small, cube-shaped drone named Cell, lifted Ethan onto the table with more care than he expected. The pain flared, and Ethan ground his teeth together. "Vitals unstable," Cell noted with a mechanical chirp. "No kidding," Ethan muttered, sweat dripping down his temple. Kirel pressed a stabilizing pad to his chest. "We must sedate you. Full trauma suite required." "No," Ethan said firmly, drawing in a shaky breath. "Just local. Keep me awake. You are experiencing shock." "I've had worse." He winced. "Just numb the area, I want to see what you're doing." Kirel stared at him, her head tilted. "This is not a test of courage. I'm not trying to prove anything. I just don't like waking up not knowing what happened." After another moment of hesitation, Kirel reluctantly complied. She injected a local anesthetic around the wound site, and the sharp pain began to dull. Then she scanned the area with a probe, her eyes widening. "The projectile is lodged between muscle layers. There is no bone damage, but there is tissue tearing. You are fortunate." "Lucky me." She retrieved a tool resembling a pair of forceps attached to a stabilizing gyroscope. With surgical focus, Kirel guided the tool into the wound. Ethan stared at the ceiling, his jaw tight. The tool clicked softly and then Kirel pulled back. A blood-smeared, flattened bullet emerged between the slender pincers. "Got it," she said. Ethan exhaled in relief. Kirel handed the bullet to Cell, who sealed it in a containment vial. Then she began cleaning the wound. "You refused sedation for this. I told you, just pull it out and patch me up." "You humans are odd," Kirel said slowly. "You accept injury with defiance. It is not logical." Ethan gave a weak chuckle. "We're not always logical. But we're stubborn." "Clearly." Over the next half hour, Kirel closed the wound with a bio-gel suture that hardened on contact. She wrapped his torso in a compression band, then helped him onto a stretcher. "You will not walk for several days." Internal bruising is severe. Figures, Ethan muttered. The crawler shifted into motion, heading back toward the main outpost. Kirel remained seated beside him, monitoring the readouts. You took cover when fired upon. That was intelligent. I've had practice. You were not issued body armor for the survey. No one expected a firefight. Kirel considered that. We will recommend adjustments to protocol. Back at the outpost, Ethan was transferred to the main medical bay. The silence was broken only by the steady beep of monitors and the distant hum of machinery. Kirel stayed for several minutes longer than necessary. You will recover in approximately 3 weeks, she said. If no complications arise. 3 weeks, Ethan raised an eyebrow. You are not invincible despite your behavior, he sighed. Guess I'll be watching more training videos than I planned. She took a step back. Your resilience is noted. But next time, do not refuse sedation. I'll think about it. Kirel turned and left without another word, her footsteps quiet across the sterile floor. The next few days passed in a haze of rest, mild painkillers, and awkward attempts to sit upright. Kirel checked in daily, always clinical, always precise. Ethan appreciated her care. Even if her bedside manner was a little blunt by day 6, he was able to stand with assistance. He shuffled slowly around the med bay, dragging a portable monitor behind him. You should not be walking yet, Kirel said the moment she saw him. I should have been shot somewhere less inconvenient. That is not humorous. Wasn't supposed to be. She guided him back to the bed. You disregard protocols, yet you heal quickly. That inconsistency is frustrating. It's just how we're wired. On day 10, Captain Viral visited. The Velari leader was taller than Kirel with a more rigid posture. We reviewed your report. Commendable actions under fire, Ethan. The Council has approved additional security measures for future expeditions. Ethan nodded. Glad to hear it. That was a rough wake-up call. You were lucky, Viral said simply. 1 centimeter higher and the projectile would have ruptured your liver. Believe me, I know. After the captain left, Kirel returned with a new scanner. Time for a deeper tissue review. You may experience discomfort. Ethan grunted. Just do it. She ran the scanner along his side. After a few minutes, she looked up. No infection, scar tissue forming as expected. You may begin light physical therapy tomorrow. Finally. Kirel handed him a small data slate. These are exercises for your recovery. Follow them precisely. I will. She hesitated at the door. I have worked with over 60 species. None respond to injury like humans. Is that a compliment or a diagnosis? A curiosity. She left before he could respond. The next morning, Ethan began the first exercises. Slow, painful movements, breathing through the pull of healing tissue. Kirel observed silently, correcting posture and movement without judgment. By week 2, he was walking laps around the med bay, still sore but stronger. He'd lost weight. The wound itched constantly, but he could move. On day 17, he met Kirel outside the bay, fully dressed in his uniform. Clear for duty? He asked. She scanned him. Yes, but avoid heavy lifting. Your abdominal wall is still weakened. I'll keep that in mind. As he reached for the door, she added, You did not panic. Most species react with terror to internal trauma. You gave instructions. I just wanted to live. That is not always enough. Ethan turned. What do you mean? Other species freeze or go into shock. You push through, even when bleeding out. He nodded slowly. We're taught to keep moving, even when it hurts. Kirel seemed to weigh that. Then gave a short nod. Then continue moving, within reason. Ethan stepped into the hallway, the sterile scent of the med bay fading behind him. He didn't feel invincible. He felt tired, but alive, and that was enough for now. The rec room lights were dimmed to a low amber, mimicking dusk on Velari Prime. Ethan sat hunched over a table with his left hand balanced on a steaming cup of something too green to be tea and too bitter to be coffee. A faint ache pulsed beneath the compression band under his shirt, but it was dull now, something manageable. Across from him, Technician Kirel examined a data pad with an intensity Ethan found mildly unsettling. You've read that page 6 times. I'm verifying disciplinary records. He leaned back slightly, the chair creaking. Mine, she nodded once. Your file is unusually long. Infractions, commendations, transfers. You've experienced 5 different planetary deployments and suffered 14 documented injuries. 15 now, Ethan said, tapping his ribs gently. Injury records on Velari personnel are rare. Most would resign after 3. He took a sip of the bitter drink and grimaced. Humans tend to stick around. That is evident. The door opened with a soft hiss, and a tall, insectoid creature entered. Its exoskeleton shimmered with iridescent hues, and its mandibles clicked softly as it approached the dispensers. That's one of the Zyvex, Ethan whispered. They don't usually leave the lower decks. They're observing interspecies psychological patterns. You are part of their study. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I'm a case study now. Your recovery behavior has triggered several cross-disciplinary reviews. Physical resilience is only part of it. The Zyvex turned, its compound eyes locking onto Ethan. A series of rapid chittering sounds came from its throat. Kirel translated. It is asking if you experienced elevated aggression during the incident. No more than usual when someone's trying to kill me, she relayed the message. The Zyvex clicked twice, then returned to its drink, the chittering fading into a low hum. You didn't answer the aggression question with metrics, Kirel said, because I don't quantify feelings, I react, then process later. That is inefficient. It's also human. Kirel tilted her head fractionally. We will revisit this during your psychological clearance. Ethan groaned. That's still happening. A full evaluation is mandatory post-trauma. Great. I'll try not to sound too sane. You will be assigned a counselor from the Morathi delegation. They specialize in non-linear cognition. That sounds promising. Later, in the medical bay, Ethan stood shirtless while a Velari scanner orb circled him slowly. Kirel monitored the results on a tall, vertical console. The bandages had been removed that morning, revealing a jagged scar running along his right side. The skin was a shade darker there, stretched and still tender. You've developed minor adhesions between muscle layers. We'll need to break them down manually. Ethan winced at the phrase. Manually? The scar tissue is interfering with normal muscle glide. You'll perform targeted movement while I apply pressure, he sighed. That sounds like it's going to hurt. It will. He lay down on the treatment slab. Kirel placed her palms above the scar, fingers spread wide. Lift your right leg slowly, hold for 10 seconds. As he moved, she pressed into the tissue with steady force. A deep, burning pull shot through his abdomen. That's not pressure, that's punishment. You are regaining mobility, pain is expected, he hissed. You Velari really don't sugarcoat anything, do you? We lack cultural euphemisms. Remind me to introduce you to sarcasm. Unnecessary. She repeated the process, shifting her fingers slightly each time. Sweat formed along Ethan's temples. How are you staying so calm while doing this? My neural state remains at equilibrium. Yours does not, I noticed. After 20 minutes, she stepped back. You may sit. Hydration is advised. Ethan pushed himself upright slowly. You ever needed this kind of therapy? No, then you're missing out. She blinked once. Human humor continues to baffle me. He rubbed the side of his neck. It's a defense mechanism. Kirel paused. Against what? Everything. By the next morning, he was cleared for light-duty scanning work in the mineral lab. It wasn't glamorous, mostly recalibrating seismic filters, but it gave him a chance to move around without being shadowed by a medical drone. The lab was quiet except for the occasional hum of the centrifuge. Ethan sat hunched over a console, adjusting the waveform sensitivity on a cluster of Phaelonite samples. The door slid open behind him. I was told you returned to active function, Kirel said, stepping inside. I'm easing back in. Thought I'd start with the fun stuff. She glanced at the screen. Those filters are misaligned. You're amplifying subharmonics. I know, I want to see what happens. That is not protocol. Neither is getting shot on a rock field, but here we are. She leaned closer, watching the waveform distort. You are deliberately inducing interference to test system resilience. Exactly. If the scanner can filter out noise, then we'll know it's stable enough for field use. Kirel hesitated, then nodded. Unorthodox, but effective. That's the motto on most of our mission patches. She tapped the console. You think in contingencies. That is noted in your file. You've really been reading that thing, huh? Your behavior has forced several departments to update their human response models. Glad I could contribute. 3 days later, Ethan was summoned to the psych wing. He arrived early, unsure what to expect. The Morathi assigned to him sat in a suspended chair that rotated slowly in place. Its body was gelatinous, translucent, with faint pulses of internal light. There were no visible eyes, but it turned toward him as he entered. You are Ethan Lorne, it said, its voice soft and resonant. That's me. You're the counselor. I am Soth. I interpret internal states. Sounds invasive. Only if you resist. Great start. Soth gestured toward the seat across from it. Ethan sat, arms crossed. You encountered violent trauma. Describe your internal reaction. I was angry, then focused, then tired. You did not experience fear, not in the moment. That comes later, Soth pulsed. Curious. Your neurological pattern suggests suppression. Probably, it's how I get through things. Why not allow fear? Because hesitation gets people killed. Soth floated slightly higher. This is not a battlefield. It could have been. They sat in silence for several seconds. Then Soth's lights dimmed slightly. Your species adapts through friction. You grow through adversity, or we break. And yet you did not. Ethan leaned forward. Look, I didn't volunteer to be an example. I was just doing my job. You are more than your function now. That's not comforting. It is not meant to be. After the session, Ethan returned to the mess hall. The Zyvex was there again, perched silently in the corner. This time it was sketching something with a long, fluid instrument. As Ethan passed, it offered him the drawing, a rough, abstract depiction of a human figure outlined in jagged red strokes. He studied it for several seconds. Is this me? The Zyvex clicked once. Looks like I've got fans. The next day, Kirel joined him during his midday walk around the outpost compound. The wind carried fine metallic dust that clung to their boots. You've resumed full physical function, she said, mostly. Your healing rate has exceeded projections. Guess I'm ahead of schedule. That is not always beneficial. Ethan stopped beside a cargo container. You're worried I'll overdo it. You already have. I can't sit around forever. Rest is not surrender. He looked at her, brow furrowed. What is it you want me to understand? You survived something statistically fatal, and you treat it as routine. Because if I think about how close I came, I might freeze next time. Kirel was quiet for a long moment, then she looked out toward the horizon. Velari do not thrive under uncertainty, you do. Not by choice. Still, you remain. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. They stood there for a while, neither speaking, the wind carrying silence between them. Ethan adjusted the elastic wrap around his torso for the third time, muttering as he stepped into the hydrotherapy chamber. The warm mist clung to his skin, and the floor panels hummed faintly beneath his boots. Kirel stood near the control panel, already keying in the parameters for his final mobility assessment. You're late, she said without looking up. You're early. That cancels out. I calibrated the aquatic resistance field 10 minutes ago. You've wasted power. Nothing like a guilt trip to start physical therapy. She raised the water level with a flick of her fingers. The field is set to simulate moderate terrestrial gravity. Begin with lateral movement. Ethan stepped waist deep into the pool. The water cushioned his movements, but the resistance was unmistakable. Each step forced his core muscles to engage, the healing scar pulling tight across his side. Side pain, she asked. Only when breathing. Maintain controlled motion. Do not compensate with your spine. I'll try not to move like a question mark. She watched him closely as he moved through the sequence side lunges, rotations, dynamic squats. After a while, he paused near the edge, catching his breath. Any of your other patients ever do hydrotherapy? One, she said. Let me guess. Velari? No, a Terran diplomat fractured ankle during a ceremonial dance. Ethan blinked. You're kidding. He attempted to mimic a three-limbed shuffle. It did not go well. He laughed and winced at the same time. That sounds about right. Kirel handed him a towel as he stepped out. You've completed the mobility threshold. You'll be cleared for full duty by end of cycle. Just like that, you've met the criteria. He sat down on the edge of the platform, towel draped over his shoulders. Feels strange, like the injury happened to someone else. Detachment is a known response, not detachment, just... I expected to feel more relief. She paused, considering. Survival often lacks closure. Ethan didn't respond right away. The room was quiet except for the drip of water off his boots. Do you ever wonder how we'd do if the roles were reversed? He asked finally. In what way? A Velari shot on Earth. In a field hospital surrounded by humans who don't understand your biology. Kirel's brow furrowed. I do not believe Velari would tolerate crude intervention. That's probably true, he said, but we'd still try to help. Even if it meant making mistakes, she studied him. You assume intent matters more than outcome. Sometimes it does. Later that day, after a quick meal of something that tasted vaguely like lentils and definitely not like chicken, Ethan made his way to the observation deck. The outpost's dome gave a full view of Phaelon 6's rust-colored horizon. The twin suns were low, casting long shadows across the ridge line. He was alone for nearly 20 minutes before the familiar clicking gait of the Zyvex approached behind him. It stood silently beside him, holding a flat crystalline panel. The image displayed was abstract angular patterns radiating outward from a dark center. What's that? Ethan asked. The Zyvex tapped the panel. A faint musical tone played, rising in pitch. You recorded the battle, the creature tilted its head slightly. You recorded my heartbeat during it, a softer click. Affirmative, Ethan leaned closer. You painted it. The Zyvex traced the lines with a slender limb. Looks like chaos. The creature tapped the center of the image, then drew a spiral around it. That's me, a single chirp. He stared at the panel for a while. You see more than we realize, don't you? The Zyvex made no reply. It simply set the panel down beside him and left. By the next rotation, his clearance form was stamped, reviewed, and officially logged. He returned to his quarters for the first time in over 2 weeks. Dust had settled along the vents, and the air smelled faintly of recycled ozone. He changed into a fresh uniform and sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the scarred shirt he'd refused to throw away. There was a soft chime at the door. Come in, he called. Kirel stepped inside, holding a small black case. You left this in the med bay, she said, handing it to him. He opened it. His original field medkit minus most of the gauze plus a single sealed vial. What's this? She gestured to the vial. Synthetic clotting agent, reformulated using your recovered blood sample. It responds faster to human enzymes. He turned the vial over in his hand. You made this. With assistance from Cell, it is a prototype, may reduce trauma response time if field injuries occur again. He looked up. You made a human-specific treatment, she nodded. Why, you're not the only human on this expedition. But you were the first to survive that kind of wound here. That's one way to leave a legacy. You also submitted 8 procedural amendments. I didn't expect anyone to read those. I did. He returned the vial to the case. Thanks. She turned to leave but hesitated at the door. You asked earlier if I ever imagined the roles reversed, she said. Yeah, I would hope, if injured on Earth, that someone like you was there. He blinked. Is that your version of a compliment? It is the closest approximation. After she left, Ethan sat back, letting the silence settle. His side still ached when he twisted, and the scar would never fully fade. But he was whole, functional, alive, and at least in some strange, alien way understood.